everyone. This episode is brought to you by our friends at Near Alta, who build grain storage and handling equipment. You can find out more about them on their website at www.nearalta.com. That's www.neeralta.com. A big thanks to them for sponsoring the show and making this conversation possible. Christians Don't Retire. I think an intentionally thought-provoking title to an article that appeared earlier this year in Reform Perspective magazine. And I'd encourage you to go read that article, but it got me thinking, what do we do as Christians in our retirement? And also, how do we prepare for that as younger people in our careers to think intentionally and act intentionally toward not just financial freedom in our retirement, how to get there, but also what are we going to be active with in our retirement? And so whether you're in your 20s or 30s or you're in your 50s, 60s, getting prepared for this stage, how do we think best about the activities that we should be busy with as Christians in our retirement years when we no longer need to work every day for our financial freedom? We've made it, as the world would say. Well, the world would say, spend it in leisure, your hobbies, look inward, travel, do the things that suit the way you want to live. And this is the time you get to enjoy the world. Now, as Christians, we know we're called to work. We're called to be here to serve. And how can we best do that in our context as Christians throughout all stages of our life? And I think we all would admit it's not necessarily only in leisure in our retirement. So today we're talking to Bruce Bruinsma. Had a wonderful conversation with Bruce. Bruce is from Colorado, lives in Colorado with his wife, Judy, has an MBA from the University of California, Berkeley, and has 40 years of experience in professional experience in retirement planning and finance. So Bruce worked in the financial services industry, working with people to plan for their retirement financially, and has dedicated his retirement years to exactly this question. How do we have the biggest impact as Christians, aside from our finances, in retirement? And so Bruce founded an organization called Retirement Reformation, which can be found at retirementreformation.org. And Bruce does speaking all over and does things just like this, has conversations with people like us to help understand this exact question. What are we to be busy with as Christians in our retirement? So join me for this conversation. It's really good. Just regardless of your age, you will for sure get something out of this conversation. I know I did. Hope you all enjoy it. So Bruce, welcome to the program. Appreciate you joining me. If you don't mind, introduce yourself a little bit. I don't know much about you at all, but you're down there in Colorado, and I understand you have a financial background. But maybe you can introduce yourself, how you got to where you are, essentially.
Sure. Be happy to do that. To have it not only a financial background, but a reformed background. Was raised in the Christian Reformed Church and was raised in Grand Rapids, Michigan. But then God had circuitous routes for my life, like He has for many of us. And if you're wondering, when you're 84 years old, those paths have gone lots of different ways. But the way that He has really directed my life was to put me in a position of helping people with retirement from a financial side of things. And so started a company 35 years ago.
Oh, wow.
And its total purpose was to work with Christ followers who worked for ministries or churches, so like pastors, to help them to prepare for their future. A couple things that we've learned over these years that impact that planning from a financial side, but also from every other piece, and we can talk about those, is that, we're all living longer. And so retirement, it used to be, when I was growing up, you worked till 65, you died at 67, and if you lived to 70, you were really old.
Right.
Now, now retirement is a 30-year period. So if you're 65, that's 95.
Hmm.
And so, but we don't have any models. We don't have any ways to really think about the impact of that longevity. And that impacts everything for the younger person thinking about planning for that time, for their parents that they're dealing with and their issues, maybe their grandparents, maybe even their great grandparents for that matter. And so all kinds of issues are there that come from that. So, so I had a company and we did retirement plans for about 2,000 churches
Oh,
and
wow.
some, yeah, some in the area, 450 Christian ministries of all kinds. So we're talking about camps, rescue missions, mission organizations, and so on. And so it was through that whole process that God taught me a lot from the people that we served, from His Word, and how do we interpret that to make a difference. Realizing that the issues that we face today are different than the issues that our forerunners have faced.
Mm.
And how do we deal with those? So, from a financial standpoint, there are just a couple of pieces that I'll mention. One is as Christians, I think when we prepare for retirement, we have our investment accounts, whether it be in the programs in Canada or in the US, is that we really don't pay much attention to where the money is invested,
Right.
just how it is invested and what returns are we getting.
Mm.
But we don't think about the impact of where that might be. And when you think about it, there are certain, I think, things that Jesus taught that we all embrace. And when we see things that are in opposition to that happening in our society, we want to push back against that. But and I'll take abortion and just as an easy one.
Hmm.
So we never think about where our money is invested in the mutual funds typically, or the accounts, or the companies, and what do they do with the investment money that we're giving to them that we're hoping will bring us a return so that we can live in in a faith-based manner, but with economic freedom
Right.
during those times of retirement. And when we analyze the accounts that where most of the money is, we'd actually be really pretty surprised
Mm.
and not pleased. And so, one of the real issues as a Christian of preparing for retirement from a financial standpoint is being aware of where the money is invested, how it is being invested, and then obviously the returns that come from it. And so, in the ministries that we serve, that was a message that we brought to, thousands of pastors, as well as staff of churches and the nonprofit organizations. And so, the best way to be prepared is to be aware of what preparation means.
Mm.
Best way to be prepared is to be prepared for what does that mean? That's how Jesus operated for those 3 years with his disciples, isn't it? He was helping them to be aware of a whole new kingdom that was being brought to earth that they were asked to being a part of that would change their life.
Right.
And so that same thought process is, what does it mean to be retired as a Christian? What does it mean to be able to deal with the financial side, but also all the other issues of it? Well, about, I don't know, 6, 7 years ago now, I guess, I had an unusual visit from the Holy Spirit. The guy seems to show up. And not only does he live within us, but sometimes taps us on the head and said, "Hey, will you listen up here, please?" And in that encounter, the dialogue was, there's a lot more to retirement than just money. And my answer was, yes, I'm aware of that. Although for most people, when you mention retirement, that's the first thing they think about.
Right.
And it's interesting is that when we retire, we're pretty clear about what we're retiring from, but we're totally unclear about what we're retiring to. And
Hmm.
what does that retiring to mean? What does that look like? What is that? What's engaged with that? And we can talk some more about that.
Hmm.
But so his word to me was, it's time to sell your company, which I did, and stayed on for a couple of years as CEO. And he said, but I've got another ministry for you. It's to be able to talk to my people, young, middle, and old, about what are the issues of retirement other than money.
Mm.
Is one of the things that we learn is that when when we are going about our life and we are hit with something that's new or unusual or different. And we have to just kind of instinctively respond. Frankly, most times our response is not a good one.
Right.
It's an emotional response. It could be defensive, it could be aggressive, it could be all kinds of things, but it's not going to help solve the problem, whatever it may be. And so to to be aware of what's coming in what the world calls retirement
Mm.
and to be prepared for it. So when the issues of retirement are in front of you, whether it be your personal ones or it be a family one, that you make decisions which are God directed and Holy Spirit inspired. Then
Mm.
you got a shot at doing it well and really making a difference. So when we realize that retirement is going to be 30 years, so whether you're preparing for it financially as a 40-year-old, let's say, because it's 30 years, you've got to have a bigger bucket than you
Right.
had when it was 5 years
Right.
or two
Yeah.
years or 8 years. You need a bigger bucket. So you've got to do more advanced planning. Not only do you need to plan how you're going to accumulate it, but you need to be aware of how it is going to then be distributed to you and how you're going to use it to to be able to experience the freedom that God would have you have, to be able to listen to what His new direction is, and then to be able to step into whatever it is that He's got planned for you. Let's talk about that for just a minute.
Hmm.
When I talk to audiences, regardless of the age, and I ask the question, I said, "So how many of you think that God has a plan for your life?" And 98% of the people wave, and the
Right.
couple of agnostics in the audience kind of put their head down. And but everybody says, yeah, they do. I said, so when do those plans start? Well, the way I read my Bible, it starts before the world began. So think about it. God had a plan for our life that started before the world began. It's hard for me to wrap my head around that, but that's what Scripture tells us.
Hmm.
So we go with that. So then what happens? Well, then we arrive on the scene, and we are a composite of the that makes up our DNA. And so everything from eye color to hair color to attitude towards things and so on comes. So that's a big deal. And then we've got up till 65 or 70, we've got all these years of experiences.
Mm.
It's not just the experiences, but it's how we respond to the experiences that creates the environment for what we learn.
Right.
So, how do you become wiser? Well, primarily by doing really stupid things. That's how you become wiser.
Yep. That
And
takes a
I'd
while.
like to say that it's, from reading scripture and prayer and so on, and all that is true. But I think all of us that are listening really understand that our most impactful life lessons are those that come from our experiences.
Mm.
So whether it be bad investments, oh well, that was really dumb, or whether it be how do I respond to a challenge in my life
Mm.
with our parents, with our siblings, with our brothers and sisters, with our kids, and with our grandkids. Now, because they got these 30 years, one of the things that we're seeing is that there can be 5 generations alive at the same time.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's true.
I mean, think about it.
Long. Yeah.
Yeah, 5. So you got great grandparents, you got grandparents, you got great grandparents, you got grandparents, you got parents, you got kids, you got their kids, and now sometimes maybe even there, depending upon when everybody gets married and so on.
Yep.
Well, I have a tough time with Judy. That's my wife, just like this. And we've only been married for 63 years, so we might get it right one of these days. But we continue to learn things, and it's a challenge there. So think
Mm.
about now, I got 2 grandsons. One's 21 and no, 22 and 20, and they're both at the Air Force Academy. And one is graduating this year, so I'm, so proud of them. But their world and the world that I was brought up in, the world that we live in now, man, we are so different. When we have breakfast, it's an amazing conversation. their probably their favorite statement is, "You got to be kidding me." And my statement is, "Really?" And so
Can't
how
believe it.
yeah, so how all these things, how all these things come together. So anyway, you got 30 years. So you got to prepare for it financially for sure. But in talking about God's plan for us, so one of the things I'll ask the audience is, so the way it appears is that his plans kind of stop at age 65 or 70, and then it's all about us.
Hmm.
And everybody kind of looks up and goes, well, yeah, I think that's probably true, but it doesn't sound right. It shouldn't be that way.
Right.
That's right. So God's plan for our life doesn't stop at 65 or 70 or 75 or 80 or 85 or 90 or 95. But the plans are different.
Hmm.
Think about think about, when you were just coming out of high school, thinking about going to college or trade school or going to work, whatever. The options that you had in front of you and how you thought about them. And so I'm not quite sure what to do, but I know God has a plan. I'll start in this direction. And if he blesses it, I'll continue. And if he doesn't, I'll figure out something else. Well, that happens at every stage of life,
Right. Yeah.
every stage of life, whether you're 50, 55, 60, 65, 70. And you go, well, what do I do now? I notice when I'm again speaking to audiences, everyone says, yeah, God has a plan. That makes sense. And I need to be in touch with what it is. That makes sense. It's going to be different than when I was 30. Yeah, I guess that makes sense. Um, but I don't know what to do.
Hmm.
There's the common theme,
Yeah,
but
that's
I don't
interesting.
know what to do.
So does that like I guess when you say retirement in our world, like it mostly means to the world, it means financial freedom and getting away from, the rat race. Like that's what people
Right.
mean. Um,
Yeah.
like is that a good definition? Like I know we
That's a
like the word
terrible, no,
retirement, we say
it's a
retirement.
terrible definition. It's a
Like
very human definition.
should we say that we don't retire or should we say that we
Yeah, well,
retire
we never,
differently?
yeah, as a matter of fact, well, let's think about this way. If we define retirement as being faithful to God's call in our life and to the mission that He's entrusted to us,
Hmm.
how long does that exist? How long does that go? Well, I think the phrase is we are called to be faithful for a lifetime.
Hmm.
Now, everything that comes before X, 60, 65, 70, 90, is in preparation for what's next. We've never arrived. We never have all the answers
Hmm.
because I'll tell you, the retirement years are the most complex years of your life. Everybody wants it to be floating on a cloud, not a care in the world, doing what I want, doing all the things I've always wanted to do,
Hmm.
um, never being emotionally, spiritually, physically, or spiritually challenged. Just I've got it all
Right.
covered. And you know what's true? There are going to be challenges in every single one of those areas.
Yeah.
Now, they are. And if you're not prepared for them, you're going to do dumb things. But if you are prepared for them and you're operating in God's spirit, then in fact you can make good decisions and it'll be the most wonderful time of your life instead of the worst
Hmm.
time of your
Yeah, no, I can totally see that. I think it's something that I think people are coming around to a little bit more, maybe with just the changing economic environment. And you alluded to some of that, like it's just not the same world. And we also are we're living longer than even 50 years ago. So, um, I guess to take a step back, like a lot of our viewership is younger. From your experience, you've experience in the financial services industry too. So, can you speak to like how should we as young people think about how to get to what we would say is retirement or financial freedom? And then we can talk about, what we should be doing in retirement.
life. Sure.
after that.
So how do we get to financial freedom? Is
You know, like how should we look at that, I guess? Should we be saving so much so that we can reverse mortgage our house later? And like it kind of came to me with looking at the parable that Jesus says talks about in or gives in Luke 12, which is the rich man who says like I need to store up more wealth for myself, essentially. Let me tear down my barns and build bigger ones. And God says to him, "Fool, because tonight your soul will be required from you." So there's an element of like responsible saving to, I guess we would say, like achieve financial freedom so that you can free yourself to do more of what what we'll talk about, like more kingdom work, I guess. But there's also an element of you need to be stewardly now, so don't just store up, store up, store up.
well, it really in like lots of things, including relationships. What is your motivation and what is your intended outcome
Mm,
for the actions that you're going to take, including saving? So if you're saving so that you can spend 10 months of the year cruising around the world, going on excursions in multiple countries, of which there are a lot of people doing that, interestingly enough, then the use of the resources that God has entrusted to you is being misused.
mm,
It was for an intended purpose, for a purpose that he did not intend. On the other hand, you take Joseph and he said we're going to have 7 years, 7 good years and 7 bad years. So we better save up for the bad years, so that in fact we can function during those bad years. Well, we got 30 bad years ahead of us.
mm.
And so what are you going to do with those resources? Now, some of them you can, and I think should, spend on leisure. Nothing wrong with leisure. Leisure has value. We need to be rested. We need to take a vacation. We need to get refreshed. We need to gain new perspective. We need to do additional study. All that's good. But if that's all you're going to do, there is no meaning and purpose. So, what is the meaning and purpose of the storing up of the resources to then be used for the betterment of his kingdom?
Mm.
Now, while we're storing up those resources, we can also use some of them to be able to support kingdom purposes here and now today. And there's certainly lots of needs for that. And so, we should be tithing.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean, yeah, but then we need to be saving beyond that. So if you want a simple formula, here's an easy one. Tithe 10, save 10, live on the rest.
Which is in Canada, 90% your house, 10% your food.
That's kind of about the way that's about the way it is these days. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
But if you want a simple formula, that's it.
Mm,
So if you spend more than you earn, you lose. If you live on what you earn, you're okay for the moment, but not for the future. So you need to live on for the moment. You need to provide some resources for God's ministries while you're here, and you need to save some. Now, how much and how do you do that?
mm.
These are mathematical things, so it depends upon your age. Let's say you're 30, and um, and let's say you're going to plan to retire, quote unquote, at 60. Okay, so how many years you got? Well, all right. Now, from 60, how many years you're going to have after that?
Right.
Well, at least 30. So you can do the math of what does it cost to live now. You can add an inflation factor to it. What's it going to take for that period of time? Go from there. Now, it's interesting. Things are changing for people. When we talk about retirement, we really usually mean we're leaving our career and doing nothing is
Right.
what we think about. more and more people are finding they don't find any meaning and purpose in that.
Mm,
The number of people that are starting new careers, starting new businesses, staying on their job, but in a perhaps with their company in a different capacity, but they're continuing to work much longer, not because necessarily they have to, but because that's a place where God can use them and they
mm,
find meaning and purpose. This whole thing about meaning and purpose, man, that is so critical. I don't care about what the age. You know, if you're 30 and you're doing a job that has no meaning and purpose to you, man, it's drudgery.
mm.
You got to drag your butt out of bed in the morning and say, one more time with Grouchy George. I don't know if I can handle this or not. So to be able to find the niche, the place where your skills, talents, and abilities can be best used in service and to be compensated for, and then to find meaning and purpose there, that's then a formula that can continue for the whole rest of your life. Now, it will look different at the different stages, but we'll go. So let me just talk about a couple of stages for a minute.
Yeah, for sure.
Clearly, yeah, clearly you got the stage between, I don't know, 15 and 30. Now, a lot of stuff happens in between 15 and 30, but it's, you're preparing, you're looking forward, you're wondering what's next, you're looking for that quote unquote job or whatever it may be. Then you got 30 to say 50. You're raising a family, there's all kinds of those issues that are coming together. And then you got 50 to say 65, which is heavy duty preparation. Typically, the kids have left the house or in the process of doing that. So you've got all the issues of empty nesting.
Mm,
I could talk for an hour about that. Just as a quick aside, I was talking to a couple weeks ago, and they're just in that empty nester phase. And I said to the wife, I said, "So what's the biggest problem that you're encountering now that you're empty nesters?" I
mm.
said, "It's not all wonderful, is it?" She says, "No, he keeps telling me where I ought to keep the peanut butter."
That's just too
And
much time on your hands or something.
yeah, way too much, way too much. So that empty nester phase is a huge time of preparation for what's going to come next
Mm,
because it's just you. I mean, we could talk about the marriage issues
hmm.
all day long that come up and are come about there because you set the stage for a whole new relationship that's going to last for 35, 40, 50 years.
Yeah.
It gets started right there. Well, at any rate, stages. So say 65 to about 78, somewhere in that range, is what I call the active stage. Yeah, you're not quite as physically capable, but mentally you're doing well. You can lead, you got ideas, you can do stuff. Start a company, you can go to work, you can go work for a ministry, you can go on mission trips, you can do all kinds of very active.
Mm, mm,
So it's not all that much different than before in terms of capacity.
mm,
About 78 to 88, things change. And you start to slow down physically. You've had 70 years of experiences. So hopefully you've garnered some wisdom
mm,
in that process. You've learned about an awful lot of things of what not to do. And so I call that the mentoring stage where you can sit with someone and they can share and you can share your experiences and so a mentoring relationships and there's all kinds of interesting both needs and opportunities. Mentoring of those that are younger,
hmm.
mentoring those that are about to transition, mentoring those that are about your same age, and interestingly enough, mentoring those that are older than you are really screwed it up and need somebody to give them some perspective.
Mm.
Okay, mentoring. Okay, now you're 88 and you're going to live to 104.
That's what
Oh
we're
my,
hoping.
yeah, now what? So physically, you've really gone downhill. Maybe still mentally sharp, but there's some issues starting to show up. So what can you do in that environment? What you can do is you can accumulate all the experience that you have now of 90 years You can simplify that and you can put it into writing or into a verbal conversation, and you can pass that on to the next generation. I'll give you a couple of examples of people who have really done great jobs with that. One is Jimmy Carter. Jimmy
Mm.
Carter, regardless of what you think about his politics, my goodness gracious, at 93, he wrote a book on faith, which
Wow.
is so good. I mean, it's he's passing on all of his what he's learned about that in his walk with God. And it's like,
Wow.
man, that's good. I never thought about it that way. Right on, Jimmy. So you can pull that together. Um, and so there are other saints that have done. Billy Graham wrote a great book just before he died at 97.
Oh, wow.
And also,
He lived
you
that
know,
long, eh?
yeah. So
Wow.
gathering all these experiences and bring them to your family, to your thing. You can go on our website or other websites. There are actually books now that are written for seniors to be able to answer these questions, and it guides them through sharing all of their life experiences.
Oh, wow. That'd be cool.
Yeah, and then be able to give that to your son or daughter or your grandson or whatever to
Hmm.
create that legacy. So a lot of people say, "Well, I'm not a writer or I can't do that." But no, but if somebody asks you a question, you can certainly respond and give them some kind of
Yeah.
an answer. So, how do we be faithful for a lifetime?
Hmm.
Really the question.
Yeah. Do you find that in that latter stage, people tend to, I mean, I guess it'd be worse if you already were embodying that retirement mentality of leisure and not having purpose. But do you find that in that last stage of life, when the body's deteriorating, maybe the mind's deteriorating, people resort to a level of care that they don't necessarily need, in terms of not looking for ways to serve, but then looking to people to serve them?
Here's the problem. As you get older, your world shrinks.
Hmm.
Friends leave, people die, people are engaged with other things, and so on. And so your world shrinks. When your world shrinks, where is your focus?
Hmm.
Focus is on you, isn't it? You turn inward.
Right.
And I will tell you, the more I turn inward, the worse it gets.
Yeah.
So you have to be aware that that's going to happen
Hmm.
and intentionally continue to expand your relationships in each one of those phases. Now, it'll be interesting as some of your readers that are younger, say like in your late 20s, early 30s. There's some of your high school friends you're still in touch with, but some of them you have no clue where they are, what they're doing. You were arms around the neck buds
Right.
when you were in high school and you thought, oh man, forever. Yeah, they're gone. They got married, they got divorced, they did this, they did that, they're gone. They're just
Yeah.
not part of your life. And so being aware of who is part of your life and making sure that it's not shrinking
Hmm.
is absolutely critical. And that's then true when you're a 90-year-old. I just had a friend of mine tell me last night, he was talking about his grandfather. And I said, when did he die? He said, he died at 94. And I said, wow, what was the last part of his life like? He said, well, at 90, he said all the high school kids in his church just loved him. He was grandpa, and they just loved him. And then when he was 90, they asked him if he'd ever grown a beard. And he said, no, I never have. They said, well, why don't you? So at 90, he had enough testosterone to grow this big white old beard that that just, all the kids just thought that was the greatest thing in the world. And
That's
so
awesome.
And so here uh, in his 90s, he was expanding his relationships with younger people, and you can expand them with older, and everybody's looking for a friend.
Hmm.
And he did die at 94, but he was sharp to the end with a big old white bushy beard. And
That's
how cool is that?
Yeah, that's great. Does that take just intentionality of like you're laying out these stages that make sense in in order, and it makes sense when you think about it. But are people doing that a lot, or are people looking 10 years into the future, thinking if I have to move into some care home or something, how am I going to prepare myself for that, or my relationships, or like is that something that's really important for people to sit down and think about and talk about?
Yeah, well, that's what the Holy Spirit meant when he said, talk to my people about what's in their head. So how are they going to serve me and how are they going to make wise decisions?
Mm,
So that's really the heart of the Retirement Reformation, is to be able to bring that messaging to people who are in preparation stage, people who are in just beginning of those stages, because there's so much interesting issues there.
hmm
And then for those that are in those three stages that I talked about. Now, here's something that's really a challenge. Because of that turning inward, the single biggest issue amongst seniors, but it starts earlier, is loneliness.
mm,
Is loneliness. And the impact of loneliness on us is absolutely huge.
hmm
In this senior world, there are four things that are happening that on one hand, I'd rather not talk about, but God says you better talk about them so people are aware of what's going on. One of them is divorce. So you got 70 and 80-year-olds getting divorced.
Wow.
We could talk about all of those issues
Yeah,
for a long.
let's touch on that a little bit. I'm
Yeah.
curious about
Well,
the marriage thing,
let me
but
give you the four, and then we can
yeah.
go through them any way you want. But divorce, bankruptcy,
Oh wow.
suicide, and addiction. Those four things. The numbers are growing in the between the 60 and the 90-year-olds, but nobody's
Wow.
talking about that. Yeah, you don't want
That
to think.
seems, yeah, it sounds like a young person problem. It's
Yeah, it's exactly.
bankruptcy and addiction and
And yep,
yeah.
all those same problems. There's enough time now and enough circumstances for those to go. So we can talk about. Let's talk about divorce for a second.
hmm
Culture's definition or culture's view of marriage is I'm going to marry you because you're going to make me happy.
Yep.
So now we get to a point in life and you're not making me happy anymore. Could be 3 years down the road, could be 50 years down the road.
Yeah, and I guess people get married with the view to that intermediate life stage, kids and all that, and not to let me spend 40, 50 years with you alone after the fact, eh?
I tell people in their 50s, I said, if you don't make your husband and your wife your best friend, there's going to be trouble ahead.
Mm, yeah.
And so you got these 70-year-olds getting divorced. And it's because they have adopted the view of the culture, which is you're not making me happy anymore, so I'm going to divorce you to find somebody because there's got to be somebody else who will make me happy. And we have
Right.
to realize that to find meaning and purpose, that all comes in our relationship with God and the meaning and purpose that we draw from Him.
Mm.
So we put our priority in totally the wrong place, our expectations in the wrong place. Then we take an action and we get divorced at, say, 70. Well, we could go on about those issues.
Then you
Um,
start dating at 70? Yeah.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Judy and I just came back from a cruise, and it was amazing the number of people. I would guess there were probably 15 or 20 couples that we met on the cruise that were in their 70s and not married and were essentially living together.
Wow. That's way more yeah, that's more common than I thought.
Yeah, it is much more. And so you see it happening all the time.
So what happens to that? Like just well, what advice would you give people, I guess, in that empty nester stage or getting to there? Um, what are the things that you can do to, you know, set your marriage up for success for the next 40 years?
Well, I tell people when we do marriage seminars, I said, probably in the whatever number of years at the time I'm doing it that Judy and I have been married, we've probably fallen in love 3 or 4 separate times.
It's a good way to look at it.
Because there's a lot of times, what I say is one of the keys to marriage is what do you do during the times that you're not in love?
Hmm.
What actions do you take? How do you respond? What do you do? How do you do it? Makes a huge difference. So the answer to the question of those that are in those empty nester stages, use this time to fall back in love and to become friends,
Hmm.
not just sexual partners, not just church going people together,
Hmm.
but friends. And that takes work, that takes effort, and it has to be intentional. So all of these things have an intention, have a root in loneliness in a shrinking world and a lack of understanding, and therefore a lack of intentionality of what am I doing to be able to make my marriage better?
Hmm.
What am
I
I
feel,
doing to show
yeah,
my life that I love her?
I think that would change the way you, um, I think you should give hopefully this advice hits to teenagers because I think that's probably a good way to look at somebody you're dating. Like if they were 70 and you're 70, are you still going to want to hang out together? Like that's, I guess, it's a bigger part of life than you think that you give credit for early on.
Absolutely, and check the marriage of the parents and the grandparents of the person you're going to marry.
Mm,
Often there's a clue.
right.
No, everybody says, "Well, I'm going to change them." Horse bucky, you're not going to at all.
Is that,
Uh,
yeah, that's true. Is that a bigger challenge? Because like for, I don't, well, I guess it's a challenge inside of marriage, but is that exacerbated by like a workaholic type approach when us men are out there giving it our all in our 30s and 40s and in maybe into our 50s before we're empty nesters? And then, having to, I mean, I think a lot of people view retirement like we hit this day when I retire. And you mentioned retiring from something, but not retiring to anything. Is that a big problem? People don't give enough thought to what's that going to look like in that, like, today I'm here or tomorrow I'm here. Yesterday I was at work kind of thing.
in the problem scale, that's a 10.
Right.
Absolutely, it is because when we ask, and there's about, interestingly enough, best as we can tell, between US and Canada, there's about 48 million Christ followers that are in that retirement age 60 to 104.
Mm,
And when you ask them, what have you or are you going to do in retirement? 90+% of them come up with some version of nothing.
golf and go on a cruise.
Golf and go on a cruise, it's all leisure based.
Right.
Okay. No meaning and purpose. So it may be a year later, maybe 2 years later, maybe 5 years later, but at some point, they wake up and go, ah, there's got to be more than this, but I don't know
Hmm.
what it is. And so then they start to look, well, maybe it's because my wife is fat. That's my problem.
Right.
My husband is lazy.
Mm,
That's my problem. And so we start finding the issues that take us off the hook, when
mm,
in fact the reality is we have a responsibility to become that friend with a husband or with a spouse, to be able to do things that are meaningful, to find that meaning and purpose that God has uniquely prepared you for,
mm.
and making a difference. So there's so many needs out there. When people say, "Well, I don't know what to do," there's a couple of different ways you can answer that. One is walk out your front door and turn right or left. And as soon as you find a need, address it. Because I
Right.
guarantee
Yeah.
you within 6 blocks, you'll find one.
Hmm.
Okay. So that's one kind of way to think about it. Another one is to be intentional and say, okay, how has God uniquely prepared me to be able to make a difference in others' lives? And so you can go back and track and see. And the way that He's prepared you, the way that He prepared me, they're different. but that's the definition of the church. He needs all these differences to be able to
Mm,
make a difference in other people's lives and to represent him to them. So there's thousands of them.
mm,
So, some of the things we focus on are like being a wraparound grandparent. Hey, there's a huge need with foster and adoptive kids. Huge need. Unbelievable.
mm,
I give you all the numbers, but it's huge. And the reason why there aren't enough foster parents or adoptive parents is because it's so darned hard to do that.
mm,
So what if you came together with 6 or 7 other couples, found a foster family in your church and said, "Hey, we'd like to just come alongside, be available and help you."
mm. That's a good idea.
Isn't that easy? And I don't care if you're 60 and you could take the kids to the ball game, or you're 94 and all you can do is pray, but everybody can do something.
Mm.
Everybody can do something.
That's a really good idea. I've never don't think I've ever thought of that.
Yeah, it's
That's
we call it you can go to our website and you can get some more information on wraparound grandparenting, it's called. And so we're working to be able to expand that message and the thought process.
mm,
It's such a need. And it's a way to, as Christians, we're called to be able to bless our community, to bless those who are in need,
hmm
to encourage those who need encouragement, to whatever. And it's an easy way to be able to do that.
hmm
Um, so many other, mentoring. I talked about mentoring there. A lot of people are aware that they could really make a difference in somebody's life as a mentor, but they don't know what mentoring means.
mm,
They think it means telling somebody else what to do, and it's not. It's listening to what someone else's issues are and sharing your experiences with them. There's another.
yeah.
So mentoring, that's another whole area. Intergenerational prayer. Get together with a group and everybody's got a church and everybody church, they've got a youth group and that youth group needs to get prayed for.
hmm
Go to the pastor, get the names of all those kids, hand them out, and start praying for them. See what would happen. Oh my goodness. Intergenerational prayer, absolutely huge.
Mm.
So there's all kinds of things. Well, one of the things that's happening in my life is that a year ago, about a year ago, my wife had a really major, major, major seizure.
Oh
It
wow.
changed her and her whole life totally. Changed mine too because I became a caregiver.
Wow.
And so the complications of that, boy, do you learn a lot about love in that environment.
Wow, yeah, you say you fall in love again. I
Well, and you have
can
to
believe it.
demonstrate it in
Mm,
very real life ways. I never had to do the wash before. I
yeah, right.
never did the dishes before. Never prepared medications before. Never
Yeah.
packed before. So, I have learned so much in the last year because of that
Wow.
occurrence that I didn't ask for and would never have wanted. But yet,
And yeah. And you spoke to like just the unexpected changing nature of that. Like it's just another challenge of, younger people don't face as often. I mean, lots of people face lots of things, but it's not something that you're really expecting to.
not expecting or prepared for.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
and so how you choose to respond
Mm,
is all part of that growth in both wisdom and in God's love. In my latest book, um, Living the Fruitful Life, the reason why I wrote it was because I've become fairly good at explaining the problem.
mm,
Where's the solution? What's the major change that has to take place? I don't care whether you're 20 or 80. What is that change that has to take place that will then make a difference in environment? And what I learned was an awful lot. Matter of fact, when I was prompted to write the book, the Holy Spirit came to me and said, "You need to learn more about me and let me work with you, but let's figure out how to work together." And I went, "Boy, I have no idea what that means." And so it was that journey to write the book and the simple answer is that when you're faced with an issue, okay, whatever it may be, you have your human way that you're going to respond to it, and you have God's way to respond to it.
Mm,
God's way starts with love, but then you got love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, and self-control. And the Holy Spirit in us, in believers, we have access to all those attributes. And so when you have to make a decision to think, which one of those attributes do I really need to call on? Is it self-control? Because
mm,
I'm about to get really ticked? Is it perseverance? Because I'm about to give up?
mm,
Is it kindness? Because I'm about to respond in a way that is not kind? And then to call on that Holy Spirit and then to be able to experience responding in those ways that He gives. And that's the answer.
mm,
That is the answer. And as we read in Corinthians and Ephesians and all the things that Paul talks about in the that Christ left us with the power of the Holy Spirit that is in us to guide us and direct us, but we need to be open to being guided and directed.
that's for sure.
And we
Yeah.
need to be willing to take the actions. Like sometimes, well, I ought to do that, but I just don't feel like it, or it scares me, or whatever it may be. And so I still act like a jerk.
Mm,
And so, how to be able to do that? So, I've got that situation with Judy right now. She's
wow.
saying, when are you going to end up having your conversation? And what she's really saying is, and I need your attention.
Mm,
That's what she's really saying. So, how do I balance those things? How do I respond in that context? And when we finish our conversation here and I interface with her again, she
mm,
will remind me, I'm sure, of of that. So, how do I deal with that?
right.
Yeah, there's part of me that wants to deal with it in a non-loving way.
Hmm.
But what does love mean in that context?
Yeah. I mean, that's a good lesson for everybody. Like, just that's you have that when you first get married, when you're newlyweds, when you're having kids. The kids are, I mean, they might bring that out, a lot. But yeah, I guess into retirement, even in unexpected situations. And how do you find that that's been for you in, yeah, I mean, you describe health challenges, but also I guess there's more to like the end, well, retirement, downsizing your house, just big decisions that you you seem to make. I would say like intentionally when you're younger, like we got to buy this house, we got to, but a lot quicker and a lot more urgently sometimes. We need a vehicle because we just had a couple kids and we need things just seem to happen to you a little bit more than you intentionally doing them. But I feel like that slows down into retirement, and there's not necessarily the urgency. And so, how is that like navigating those
If
decisions
you
together?
if there's a need like to downsize, let's take that one.
Mm,
Um, if you realize it and prepare for the timing of it and for the location of it, boy, it can be very freeing.
mm,
If you wait too long, you got a real mess on your hands.
right.
And so it's being aware of the timing and the pathway, the steps to take to do that.
Mm,
And have done some experience and done some looking. It's everything from, do I go to independent living? Do I just go to an apartment? Do I go to a smaller house? Do I go to a co-op? There's a whole bunch of options. That's why when I say the retirement years and the decisions are more complex.
mm,
And one of the reasons they're more complex is because there are probably more legitimate options and they extend over a longer period of time. When you
right.
got two kids, and you've got an old Volkswagen, you say this isn't working. I gotta get some more room here.
Yeah.
Uh, and so that's pretty obvious. Uh, but when your world is shrinking, physical issues, and so on. I'll give you an example. We live in a fairly big house, designed it all for one level, but we got another whole level below. We got 2.5 acres. Judy can't take care of the house, and I
Mm.
can't take care of the outside. So we made a plan to have a couple that was in ministry, but that had not prepared for their time. They can't afford to buy a house
Hmm.
or rent one. So they live with us, and she takes care of the inside and he takes care of the outside. It's good for them and it's good for us. Now, how
Yeah,
long will
that's a
that last? I don't know, but there will come an end to that also.
right.
So we just simply need to be aware and intentional
Mm.
and allow the Holy Spirit to guide us because He will.
Hmm.
And that's whether you're 20 or 80.
Hmm. And I guess the time isn't necessarily always urgent, but intentionality, I guess, is
But
the
it will become urgent
key. Yeah,
if you
right.
don't do it on a timely basis.
Right. Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, well, yeah, that's a good point. Well, I don't want to keep you too long. I do have one other thing I was thinking about when preparing for this, and we talked about traveling a little bit, and you just came back from a cruise, and
Yeah.
there are good, I guess, leisure activities, but I wanted to ask you about snowbird culture because that's huge up here in Canada.
Yeah.
Maybe it's going away a little bit. I'm getting a little bit older, but when
No,
I was younger,
there were a whole bunch of Canadians on the cruise.
oh yeah, yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
so I'm actually from Ontario, so I'm out in Calgary now, but I was from Hamilton area, and that was lots of southern Ontario goes down to Florida for for the winter. So
Okay, I
that's
understand your question is, so what about that? Here's here is an answer or a thought. You can represent Jesus wherever you are. So if you go in the winter and you spend time in Fort Lauderdale, you can represent him there. But I'm going to give you another answer. Met a guy on this cruise. We had a Bible study going every morning,
oh cool.
and I talked to this guy from Arizona, and I don't know how it came up, but anyway, I said, so you've been cruising for a long time. Have you found anything unique to be able to do on cruises that impacts the kingdom? He says, well, yeah. He says, I call it cruises for Christ. I said, really? What does that mean? He says, well, I'm going on a cruise. So I'll like go through the itinerary and I'll pick at least two towns and I'll go online and I'll find either an orphanage or a local ministry of some kind there. I'll contact them in advance, tell them when we're going to be in port, ask them if they come pick us up. We'd like to see what God is doing in their ministry and bless them if we can.
Wow.
So what? What a great idea is that? And so I said, so have you done that on this cruise? He said, yeah. I said, what you got coming up? He says, well, we're going to be on the island of Madeira. And I got this small church that I contacted, and they're going to pick us up and we're because it was going to be on a Sunday, and we're going to go to their church and see what God's doing there and how we can help. It's fantastic. I said, can I come along? He said, oh yeah, sure, come on along. Well,
Cool.
and I could take the next 20 minutes, and then we just had a fantastic time. But it was amazing. And looking, we said to the pastor, so what is it that your church needs to be able to take the next step in ministry? And he said, because their church service was in a office building.
Mm,
They said, we need a sign. What do you mean you need a sign? Yeah, well, we don't have a sign to put out front to be able to tell people that we got a church going on here.
right.
Well, no kidding. I think we can probably help with that.
Right.
So they now have a sign.
That is cool.
Yeah. And so you just never know what their needs are. And when you go on an excursion on a cruise, it's usually a couple $100 a person. So if you don't go on an excursion, you got at least $400 that you can bless them with
Yep.
to help with whatever.
Yep.
So there's, what can you do?
Mm,
Well, I got about another half hour on Cruises for Christ, but just real simply, it was right for Jesus to come at the time. One of the reasons was because of all the roads that the Romans had created, and so there was ease of communication and travel
mm.
all over the world, so the word could spread. Our version of those Roman roads are cruise ships. There's 19 million people that go on a cruise this year from US and Canada, 19 million.
Wow.
So
That's a
think
lot.
of it, yeah, so think if only 10 million are faithful, faith followers. It's probably more, but let's say 10 million, that's 1.9 million. Let's say only 10% of them jumped on this idea of helping somebody there. That's 190,000 people. That's 190,000 ministries that are impact all over the world by Christians who are going on cruises. I
That'd be
think that's a
cool.
really good idea.
That's a good idea. Yeah. That's finding a spot no one's thought about before. Like unique, unique approach. That wow. It's just in intentionality. That's what I'm getting at. Always be looking because while you might think it's just a leisure thing to do, it's oh, I got all my alcohol included in this thing. Great. It's like, well,
Yep.
did you call a church or something? You know, make sure you're doing something on Sunday or make sure you're
You're doing
meeting
it on
people
Thursday.
and
Well, go on. Another place we went to an orphanage,
that's so cool.
and this guy is a local guy, and he's running this orphanage. They got about 20 kids, and said, "What do you need?" And he, anyway, there was a vendor down the street. A guy was selling blankets and shirts. So went down and bought 20 sets of blankets and shirts and gave them to him. He said, "That's exactly what we need." He said, in 20 years, nobody from a cruise ship has ever stopped or called or been around or anything. It's amazing. Thank you so much. And we'll have a
Nice.
continued relationship with them and do that. But it's
Wow.
not part of some big ministry. It's just some guy who had a heart for kids and it's got this orphanage going on.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's cool. Like I think we underestimate the impact that we can have.
Absolutely, we
It's
do.
and especially into our retirement years. So
Everybody,
that's
remember, everybody can do something. And the call is to be faithful for a lifetime.
mm,
There's the there's the parameters within which we are called to work.
yeah, that sums it up great. Hey, appreciate your time, Bruce. It's been wonderful to talk to you. I think this will definitely help our listeners, young and old, um, especially as
And
young people head into maybe even their working years or into their empty nester years, um, be thinking about retirement. And for our older listeners, I think this is obviously clearly had some good value. So intentionality, doing things with the kingdom in mind. So.
if you want more information, going to retirementreformation.org is our website. We got a lot of information there. Got 134 podcasts on all different kinds of topics, and would be more than happy to come and spend some more time with you and with your audience. And if you get questions from any of your audience, uh, please feel free to forward them to me, and we'll figure out a way to at
Sounds
least give
good.
them give them an answer.
Sounds great. Thanks for everyone who listened. And Bruce, again, appreciate your time. Appreciate all the work that you do. And we'll link all the retirement reformation stuff. And hopefully some of our listeners get in touch.
Hey, we'll look forward to that, and thank you for what you do. God bless.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Real Talk. In partnership with Reform Perspective, this show is created and produced by Tyler Vanderwood, Lucas Holtfleur, and Mariah Tamiga. We really appreciate you taking the time to listen or watch the show. If you have any feedback for us or ideas for future guests or topics, please let us know. You can reach us at reformedrealtalk@gmail.com. Be sure to also follow us on social media. You can search Reformed Real Talk on any of the platforms. We should come right up. Also, leave us a review, preferably a 5-star one, on any of the podcast platforms. That would be greatly appreciated. That's all for now, folks. Keep having real talk.